Today we'll be giving a gameplay overview and review of the game Orléans Invasion. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode with To Die For Games. I'm Tracy, the gaming maven.
And I'm Stephane, the games teacher.
Are you looking to see what the setup is? Not quite sure? Well, click on the timestamp below and you'll find the part you're looking for.
Subscribe to be notified when we post new content, and leave us a comment to let us know how we're doing.
And with that, we're going to invade some Orléans.
All right, let's get to it.
In Orléans Invasion, there are multiple modules, but in the prosperity scenario, basically you're playing similar to the base game, but you've added carpenters, you're looking to build structure cards, and trying to win the game after 16 rounds.
So here we have the components for the Orleans Invasion expansion. Now, the expansion box actually includes components for different scenarios. We're going to look at those in further videos later on, but for now I'm just going to show you what comes in the box. So we have scenario boards for the Invasion expansion, and we have 5 additional scenario boards for the other 5 scenarios that are included in the box. We have the support action boards, 1 for each player, the assembly hall board. We have here 5 carpenter action boards, again 1 for each player, the bourgeoisie house, the vineyard and market stands and other place tiles. The game includes a setup support card to help you determine the setup requirements for the different player counts. We have here structure cards. These are character cards with personal scoring options. It comes with some additional coins, a carpenter marker, some neutrality markers, some additional citizen tokens, cover-up tokens which you use with the prosperity expansion, special building tiles, and some hourglass tiles used in the invasion expansion. So we're going to go through the setup for the prosperity scenario from the Orleans Invasion expansion. To start, we're going to start with the main board, place it out in the center of the table, and we're going to, with a 2-player setup, which we have here for blue and yellow, we're going to remove 12 random goods tiles from the supply, and then we're going to seed the goods tiles on the main board with all of the goods hidden, so you don't actually get to see what they are at the start of the game. We're going to place our player pawns on each in Orleans at the starting position, as well as the white carpenter pawn from the expansion. We're going to place our worker tokens out on the board as per the main game setup, as well as the cogwheel tokens for technological innovations. We're going to have 3 citizen tokens placed on the prosperity board. We're also going to have citizen tokens placed on the sailor and knights tracks of the main board, but no prosperity tokens along the development track. Each player will take their player board, the carpenter board, the tokens of their player color, as well as 1 neutral marker, which they'll use throughout the course of the game, and 5 coins as per the base game setup. They will place a cover marker on the scriptorium action, so it covers up the default scriptorium action with this new action board. They will place out their 4 starting workers. A neutral token marker will be placed on the or the hourglass spaces of the prosperity board. We will have a special selection based on the rules of structured or place tiles that will come out. And we also have this deck of structure cards, which we will shuffle up. And at the start of the game, each player will be dealt 2 structure cards. The rest of the citizen tiles will be placed over here as a supply, as well as the remaining coin. And with that, we're ready to start. So now we're going to highlight the differences in gameplay between the base game and the prosperity scenario from the Orleans Invasion expansion. First thing we want to talk about, we have these structure cards, and at the start of the game, each player is dealt 2 structure cards. They will get to keep 1. So on the beginning of their first turn, basically each player will look at the 2 structure cards they've been given, and they will choose one to keep. Now in this case I have Blois Chapel, and I also have the Loche Ferry House. And I'm going to keep Blois, as Blois is fairly close to the Orleans starting position. So I'm going to hold on to that. And the second card is going to be discarded back to the bottom of the supply pile. So what do structure cards give you? Well, we'll look at the carpenter board and we'll be able to describe how that action works. And that'll tell us how the structure cards are used. So each player will receive this carpenter board, which allows them to place up to 1 to 3 workers of either boatsmen or tradesmen in order to move the carpenter token across either a land route for a tradesman or a water route for a boatsman. So in order to make use of my structure card, I'm going to place a boatsman here during the planning phase. When we go to resolve the actions, now for the boatsman here, I can basically move the carpenter from its starting position across a water route, and he ends up in Blois, which, if you'll recall, is where I had my structure card, the Blois Chapel. Now, he can then place one of my trading houses on a goods card adjacent to the city of Blois. So in this case, I have goods cards available, goods tokens on each of these spaces, but if they had previously been acquired by other players, then I would not be able to place that trading house on one of those spaces. Doing so will earn me some victory points towards the end of the game. Now you will only earn those victory points at the end of the game if you fulfill the requirements of the structure card in question. So in this case, it's looking for a knight and a monk, and you would have to supply those from the workers that you draw out of your bag during the planning phase. And when you complete it fully, then those worker tokens will go back to the main supply and can be hired again in a future turn. Some of the structure cards have a requirement for either specific goods tiles or coins, and if you play those on the structure cards, those are not returned to the general supply, but instead are removed from the game when you fulfill the structure card. After fulfilling the structure card, you would then flip it back over and place it underneath your neutral marker pawn to indicate that it is a completed structure card. Another thing that's different in the prosperity scenario is the scriptorium action space is covered up by this tile. Now the tile gives you a little bit more flexibility in that you can now use the scriptorium action to either get a development point along the development track as per normal, or use it to get additional structure cards from the card deck supply. And as at the start of the game, you would draw 2 structure cards and choose one to keep and discard the other to the bottom of the pile. The prosperity board here, scenario board, includes specific events in a static order. These replace the original hourglass tiles from the base game. The hourglass tiles, there were 18 of them, and they were randomly shuffled up, so you never knew which one was coming next. In this case, we don't use the hourglass tiles, we use these events, and each of the events actions are described, or effects are described in the rulebook. And there's 16 of them, and they'll always happen in the same order. In addition, with the prosperity scenario, we do not play with the beneficial actions board from the base game. Instead, the prosperity scenario includes these 3 beneficial actions which we can take to earn coins and or movement up the development track. So that's basically all the changes between the prosperity scenario and the base game. Game end. So the game will end after all 16 events have happened and 16 rounds have been played. At that point, the regular game scoring happens as per usual. Now, it is important to note, however, that your trading stations only count towards endgame scoring if they are on the cities, not on the goods tiles, so not for the structure cards that you completed. In addition to that, you'll earn points for the structure cards based on the ones that are completed underneath your neutral marker, and you'll total up all the victory point values of each of the structure cards that you've completed over the course of the game. And with that, that will determine your final score. The player with the most points wins the game.
And now we're ready to give our review of Orleans Invasion. So Stephane, what do you think?
There's a lot in the box, and I like that there's different modalities of gameplay. You've got cooperative, you've got more competitive games, you've got a two-player version. So I really like that there's so much in this big expansion.
It's not just like one little thing, it's a bunch of things that can be added and make the game different. Like the base game is fantastic by itself. The expansion just kind of adds a little bit, makes it a little more richer, gives you different ways to play it. So I like it too.
So in this review, we talked about the prosperity scenario specifically, which is still a multiplayer scenario. It is still a competitive scenario. It's not cooperative. In that scenario, you know, there's a few different gaming mechanisms that are different for the base game to give it a kind of a fresh look.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about art and theme. So it kind of ties in really well with the original game. Now, my one quip that I have, no, well, actually that'll be in components, so we'll talk about that after. But for art and theme, it's very similar. You can they made it very consistent, which I like. I love the look of this game. It's bright without being like crazy colorful. It's the right amount of balance of visually appealing without being like too much for your eyes to handle. And it does have that kind of look of a medieval French feel to it that I really like.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep, with everything you just said.
So components, what do you think of the components?
The components are fairly high quality, again. However, they did design this expansion for people who do not have the deluxe version of the base game. And so if you have the deluxe version of the base game, the resource tokens are wooden. And this, the prosperity scenario specifically requires you to play with the cardboard resource tokens because they need to be face down so you don't know what they are on the main map. So, you know, I was a little upset about that. What did you think about that?
Well, I wasn't sure how they would have fixed it. So we didn't get the deluxe because they did do a Kickstarter of this expansion. So there is a deluxe version of this expansion. We don't know what it is, but I don't think they could have made. I'm not sure how they could have made those wooden because on the board in the main game you have tokens that are actual physically a piece of wood and a piece of cloth. But you have to have those turned, like you have little things on the board that cover those spots, and they're on the other side of these tokens, so you can use them, but not. So I'm not sure how they did that. They might have just added, since you don't ever turn them really over. No, you do turn them over because you need to in case you use it to collect the resource instead of build. So I'm not sure what they did, but I am kind of sad about that because we have the deluxe version of the original game.
So having to pull out all those old cardboard tokens that never saw the light of day from the base game was a little bit off-putting. The gameplay, however, for this was pretty good.
Yeah, so let's talk about game mechanics. This is actually where this game absolutely shines and really makes the game much more richer.
I like they took the randomness of the hourglass tiles at the time. I forget the exact terminology for them.
I can't remember. They're the hourglass tiles.
Yeah, so the hourglass tiles in the original game were randomly shuffled, and then they would come out in a random order. In this version of the game, you don't play with those tiles at all. You have a set series of time actions that happen in the same order every time you play the game. So it allows you to do a bit more planning if you're that type of game player and you like to do a bit of planning ahead.
And some people might say, well, I like the randomness of the tiles. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff in this game that really rely on strategy. So knowing those in advance was a little helpful, so you could plan ahead. Didn't necessarily mean you made it. Some of them, like some of the penalty ones, I still didn't manage to make, even though I knew it was coming up. Just didn't happen. So I don't think it made the game easier per se. I think it still allowed for enough strategy, but allowed you to plan ahead a little bit more, which in the original game it doesn't let you do. For me, the mechanics, I liked the carpenter. That one of the big things that the prosperity expansion part of it added to was the carpenter. I like that the board changed a little bit. So instead of just going around collecting resources and building the cities, you have these cards that you're trying to build on, And once you build your town, little houses on that city instead of the other ones, then you also can get victory points that way by putting guys on those cards.
Another way to score points, so that's always a plus in my books.
I always like multiple strategies to win, because then one strategy doesn't take it all, so it just adds more to it. So I really like that. So, similar games.
You know, nothing's coming to mind, at least to my mind. Orleans itself was a pretty original, you know, mechanics-wise. Sure, it's a worker placement, but it does worker placement in a very different way than I've seen in most other games. Now, I've played quite a few games. I haven't played all of them. So if you guys have any suggestions to enlighten me, please let me know. But I don't know, do you think of anything?
I kind of thought, now this is an expansion, so I'm comparing the base game of this game with the expansion, because Concordia has some expansions that really add to the game. So things like Salsa, and I'm trying to remember the other, Britannia, I think
Germania,
it is.
yeah.
Stuff like that. The expansions to Concordia really add, and I find make the game richer. So very similar to those expansions, this one does that too. And Concordia and Orleans base games have similar, the whole point-to-point movement mechanic and a couple other things that are similar. So.
And again, we still only have touched in this video on the prosperity scenario. So there's 4 or 5 other scenarios in the box for you to explore and play with as well.
Now, what I like particularly about this is how they managed to make, because we did look a little bit about the rules, how they managed to make a normally competitive game into a cooperative game. So one of the expansions is cooperative. So I like that, and I like that there's like a 2-player version that makes it most balanced for 2 players.
And there's 3 single-player scenarios. If you're the type of person who likes to play solo games, you know, there's some scenarios there for you as well. So really lots to still explore in the invasion expansion to Orleans, and I'm looking forward to playing the other scenarios.
So for me, it's like 5 big thumbs up.
I agree. Orleans was one of my big hits when it came out, and this expansion really adds a lot to that. So glad to see that hit the table again.
And with that, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Follow us on social media.